you know we're competing against Trump. He's on right now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Fine Scale Live Build Show for January 8th, 2019, our first show this year. And we're getting the band back together again. We got the full crew, basically. So, and some additional assistants in person, live and in person. See, we're not just motorrunners hidden in the basement, never come out to see daylight, even if we are a little pasty. And we got Joey from the channel. Most everybody know Joey.
How you doing?
So we're being sociable, showing off the layout. In 4 years of working on my layout so far, he is only the second human being other than my wife to have seen it in person. Of course, everybody's seen it via the internet, but we live in Kentucky where there's not a lot of model railroaders in my part of the state anyway, it seems. So we're going to get back to the project that we started last month. We started with hydrocal structure build, got a basic assembly and some decals. We're going to get basic assembly with some epoxy. This month we're going to start and work with some coloration, several of us, and maybe talk about building roof and a little bit of structural material before the show's up. So thanks everybody for joining us. Of course, Ralph, Miles, and Lloyd as always. Thanks Johnny for directing. I got a first comment. That's something spectacular, Miles. You got to tell us what you're doing there. It's not exactly a hydrocal structure, but it's pretty doggone impressive.
Now this is a tree. It's a long story. But I'll try and do it quick. My girlfriend from high school, a lady that I actually dated, is crazy about collecting Gone with the Wind stuff from the movie, and she actually started a museum down in Warrensburg, Missouri. And so the museum didn't do too well, but she has the whole collection and everything still going. And in her basement in her house, it looks like a museum down there because she has so much stuff. She has the model of Tara from the movie Gone with the Wind. And the front module of it, the 4x8 piece that was the circular driveway and this tree, those were lost in shipment. And so I've contracted with her, and I'm going to reconstruct that entire front section. I'll go upstairs in a little bit and show you the front section's already made, and I've got some green cover on it. But this tree is the main tree out in front of the southern mansion that was Tara. And all in dollhouse scale, inch to the foot. So this tree is pretty massive. It's 2 inches around and stands about 30 inches tall. And so I'm carving the trunk right now.
1.5 scale? That is, what's the proportion of that?
No, I'm sorry if I said 1 inch scale, dollhouse scale.
Okay, 1 inch scale. Yeah, there's a lot of parts for that, and I go through that section and buy some oddities from there occasionally in the craft stores.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there for dollhouse scale, 1 inch scale.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. So and I'll show you guys what I've got, what I've started on. We got to get an update from Lloyd because he has far exceeded the expectations for our construction. So we did the basic assembly on this structure last month. I've just primed it. I've got a couple colors of primer. I got gray and brown. So my stucco's colored in a gray primer, brown for the brick. I often do different primers, and if you talk to, especially an automotive painter, probably more than anybody else, but maybe a house painter in the real world, large-scale painters, they'll tell you the impact of primer colors on your finished material. In my experience, and I'm not an expert at this, and have just been playing with various colors, in my experience, I get a crisper color if I work with a gray. So in the case of this other structure that I'm working with, this is all in gray primer. I want the brick to be punchier, crisper, and I'll use brighter brick colors instead of the dull colors, and I'll stay further away from the nutmegs and other colors I've done on this one. But the other with the brown will have a warmer brick tone. This is the structure, you remember, that is cut off at the fascia, cut off diagonally, and I've modeled the floor joists and ceiling rafters exposed, so it looks like it was, slit, cleanly like that. So that's this one. We may not make as much progress. We'll work on some color for this one. And Ralph's jumping the gun too. We'll work on some colors. What he's doing it is the same technique that I found works so well with brick. In my case too, the sponging and some cheap paints and a wide range of brick colors work spectacular for me too. But Lloyd, you got to catch us up on your project, and then we'll get Miles to explain what he's doing. Or I'm sorry, get Ralph to explain what he's doing with his coloration.
Okay, so we'll talk about the hydrocal because that's what the project is mainly about. So I had ordered the old mansion. What was it called? The old Anderson place. And basically what I wanted to do was do like an old feed mill that's completely abandoned. And just happens that the old Anderson place is an abandoned building. So, yeah, I went ahead and I painted the building. First, I gave it a primer on the hydrocal. And then I used the sponge technique to apply the paint. I went with the rusted paint. And as I was going along, I added dabs of black mixed into it, so to give it like a really dirty look.
How'd you apply?
With a sponge. I just said it.
Sorry.
So
pay
yeah,
attention, Andy, because we're going to ask questions.
I knew there was going to be a test later. I knew that.
So yeah, it was applied with a sponge. Like I said, I made the paint darker as I was going along, so that it gave like a really old look.
A little bit more to the right, Lloyd.
Right, right this way. Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Now it's going back out of frame again. There we go.
Here we go. So yeah, that's it with the paint. And of course, it came with the broken windows, came with the boards. Oops, here we go again. So, not much else to say about that.
And that is real lumber. We talked about that already, me and you, but that's actual lumber. Whereas on the structure that I got from them, it is it's hydrocal as a detail. And I've been so tempted to cut it off. I haven't done that yet, but I've really been tempted to.
Yeah, the kit came with the boards. I think it's what do you call it, basswood?
Yep, the harder wood. Yep.
Yeah, so it came with it, and like I think it was a 10-inch piece.
I wish they'd done that on the structure I've got. I found another solution on this kit. They molded it into the brick. Now this is this kit that I'm working on. I got a couple of these downtown Deckios, several hydrocals, and I got a few of those old, at least one, maybe two of those York structures, and I think they've been out of business for 20 years or something. But I'm a real big fan of those old York kits. But they molded that on. I've been tempted to just try to cut it off, and if I fail, cut it off, put wood over top, or cut it off and put a loading door. Actually, I'm more leaning toward the loading door. If I did fail or damage it and didn't break the whole structure out, Lloyd's suggestion was to build a small shed, effectively, like they had, like it had a roof over it, and they had just enclosed the roof or something, which made a lot of sense to me. That seemed like a good idea. So I've been tempted to cut this out, put a loading door in, but I haven't decided to do that. But tonight we'll work on some color. The front's going to be a little harder. In this case, I have, in my case, I finished the assembly that we did last month. Yeah, mine sets into the diorama, if you remember from last month, or I may be able to show you in a minute. I've used stonework. This is dental plaster stonework strips from New England Brownstone, NE Brownstone, or November Echo, brownstone.com. I'm a massive fan of this dental plaster and the stuff they build in particular. So I use that stuff to finish this in here. There's some matching retaining walls nearby in the scenery that holds the wall back. On the opposing side, I used some a piece of the brick that was a leftover remainder piece of where I shortened these walls to get the diagonal effect that I have for this structure, as it
Right.
as it's the see-through, and I gauged some brick material from it. I've also been playing, and then the front, and I've got the stonework in a couple different colors, and I've been slowly, as I've primed stuff and worked with brown, I've slowly dry brushed a little bit more brown over the rock and enough layers of different colors, and eventually I end up somewhat happy with it. Basically, has been my approach to the stonework. I would not say I have a spectacular and well-defined technique for that. I just keep applying funny colors until I get something that doesn't look like a cloud. So, but I primed the whole thing brown except for the part that I wanted, the concrete parts, and I primed those gray to keep those a richer color. I am experimenting, and I'll show you this last thing before we get a catch up from Ralph and move on. I've been playing with getting a stucco effect. So, interestingly enough, one of the earliest videos that I seen Modeler Man Mike show on this channel, and how I ultimately found YouTube Model Builders originally, was through a couple of Modeler Man Mike's videos, like most of us found it in the early days, some years ago. He done a video making some Texas-style stucco using Durham's water putty, which is what I make roads out of these days, at least concrete roads. It's spectacular. I tried making roads with plaster and cracking them. I think plaster is great if you don't have to try to crack it. This stuff is, I'm a real big fan of the Durham's water putty. He put paint on and dusted it with Durham's water putty in multiple layers until he built up stucco. I think the effect looked great on camera. I think it would be an exaggerated effect for the style of concrete facade finish that this is. This is not this is not meant to emulate a rough stucco. It's meant to emulate a concrete surfacing or facing put over the brick, which some of it broke out. I even primed that brick with red as well, although I think I'll have to take some micro brushes to brush in the various colors, make sure that doesn't overlap. But I took a piece, but I think that would be an exaggerated effect. So I took a sponge, and on the backside, so I was working on hydrocal. I did four different textures with gesso. Gesso is a pretty similar material to what you would get with paint. Paint being a medium of some sort, acrylic paint that is. Acrylic paint is a medium with a particulate pigment in it, either mineral based or whatever it is, vinyl or whatever, various particulates. But it's a quite fine particulate. Doing the Durham's water putty adds, a coarser particulate to it. Gesso is a very similar thing to that. Gesso is an artist's medium with no pigment. It's just white, like Mod Podge. It's not that dissimilar, it's just thicker. But it has a particulate in it. Often, it's not granite.
Ceramic powder.
That's what it is, ceramic. I was wanting to say granite, but I knew it was a hard rock powder and it has it's not a sandiness to it. It's a very subtle effect. And I don't know if I could get this to cast light sometimes. And I showed it to Ralph, and I think I was reasonably successful at getting it to cast a shadow so you could see. And I did four distinct sections. This section up here being quite coarse with the stucco. It's a nice effect for like possibly a Texas knockdown or some kind of more extreme test. I've done something finer that might be more what they would call Spanish lace style of stucco or of knockdown. And I've done four different densities of that. I am pretty convinced that I will get the effect I want with gesso, so I am going to try that, I think, on this structure. But I've been less experimentative with the structure since this was a harder kit to find originally. It's a Downtown Deco kit that hasn't been made for a few years, and it was some number of 250 units that they sold. So if I really screwed it up, now Randy with Downtown Deco, if you buy one of their kits and needed a replacement wall, you could reach out to him and work something out. Or if one of them broke in shipping, he would help you out. He's a real nice guy. But I don't think that he would have a mechanism to get me a replacement wall if especially if I screwed this thing up of my older cognizance. So that's been my thinking, and we'll start working some paint. Ralph's already got a head start on us, so why don't you catch us up with what you've been doing, Ralph, and give us
not much of a head start. You've already got yours together. I just have walls.
Yeah, well,
So I primed them today. On this one here, I primed. It's a Rust-Oleum stone finish. It has sort of a grit in it. You want your stucco? That's the one to use.
yeah, good idea. I'll give that a test too.
It's not really pronounced, but it is there.
Yeah, that's all I want. It's a subtle effect.
So I masked areas off. Like the top part here is where brick is showing, and the bottom part is stone. And I really don't know why he's made that separation like that, the stone to the brick, but that's the way the kit is. So right now it's masked off so I can paint the brick.
Huh.
And I painted the brick a gray color.
Yep.
And the stone, obviously, the sand color. Then I did this wall here is done with automotive red primer, oxide primer. First.
Oh, I like that. I love that as a base color.
And this is also automotive primer, the black. It's actually a gray, a dark gray. And I'm experimenting with the colors. I have dark brown and a brick red. And this is a combination of both right now, this part. I don't know whether you can see the difference. There. I'm working on the other side. I've added the dark to it. This, like I said, this was originally red to start with, and this is black. So I'm doing the opposite, applying the paint the opposite way. So I put the dark on first, and then I'm going to put the red on top of it. This one here, it's the same thing. This is where the wall is broken out, and it's plaster in behind. It's plaster? No, it's stone. It's stone in behind there too. I don't understand why it's up there as stone, but that's the way Randy's done it. And this was red oxide, and this is just the red brick color so far.
What is that edge that you have? Is that stone there?
Here?
Yeah, is that stone there that you?
It's masking tape covering the stone.
That's what I thought. Now, see, the other one that is the where the mating point between the brick and the stone is angled makes a bit more sense to me, as if it was originally a lowered structure that no, I think it was a different wall you had that had an angled.
This one?
Right. See, there's kind of an angled mating point there, which kind of to me looks like it had that it was originally a stone structure with a pitched roof, and somebody went back down to the second floor and bricked, built the second floor with brick. I'm not sure. It's hard to explain that rock and brick combination.
Yeah, it is hard to explain. If I take the tape off, I won't be able to continue with the painting. So
we'll look at it a lot.
So that's where I'm at, and the thing that I did today was like just clean off the edges and so on, because this is not a build-up structure. It's a long structure, and it is, I don't know, it's there you can see that picture. They all fit together side by side to create a wall.
Yeah, flat. Yeah, backdrop flat.
Flat.
I love that kit.
It just so happens this was one of the kits Randy had a contest. He put out a note on Facebook asking for weathered cars and so on. And this was the one. That's my weathered box car on the picture.
That's incredible. You got a kit that has.
So he sent me the kit.
Cool. Yeah.
As a thank you for the cars.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy. I like his products, but I'm a pretty big fan of Randy himself too. After talking to him a bit lately.
The nice part about working with the brickwork and so on You can actually chip out some of these bricks if you want. You can cut them out and make the wall look like it's been, what are they called? The bricks when it's spalling, when you get frost going in behind the bricks.
Right, and it defaces the front of the brick.
Yeah, takes the front of the face off. Like, actually, that's happened here, right above the door.
Right, I have quite a bit of that on this
done that
too. Yeah. Oh, actually, this wall he did quite a bit of that on. So I'm gonna, I've got to play with some technique to kind of bring out the color, and especially when you can really draw that out when you come back to borderline it.
Right.
Let's answer a couple of questions. I see we definitely got one too. Is Indian Head Valley? Of course, we need to answer that, but also you might want to go back and look at last month's show as well, because we talked about that a little bit more in depth, especially with regard to some of the options as to how to assemble the structure. You could use various types of adhesive down to a white glue. I've seen people talk about doing that. I am a stickler for epoxy on anything other than wood or styrene, pretty much. So hydrocal, resin, something like that. I really, really, really prefer epoxy. And these structures have some heft. I mean, that's a quarter-inch thick hydrocal. It's quite tough. I think they're more stout than most of the structures you'd get a hold of. Even now, I mean, I will say, imagine that laser art wood structures that are built out of 8-inch MDF are pretty stout themselves. But you can't go wrong with epoxy. In my case, I also come back after it was seamed and after last month's show and filled the seams with spackle. Now, you could use plaster or actually Ralph was talking about, sounded like a good idea to me too, but it sounded like a great idea. I just didn't happen to do it. But using the plaster plaster dust that you collect off this from sanding the walls, because you need to sand the mating surface. Of course, make sure you look at the kit and don't sand off the brick detail that's on the end cap of the wall, but you need to sand the mating surface to get a very tight joint. But I filled it with spackle and then come back with a straight, and I roughly aligned the border lines and come back with a straight edge and X-Acto. And I use the back side of the X-Acto, but chop those walls out. I think the stucco or the spackle effect really worked well filling the seam in the stucco. It's not as necessary on the brick. Also, a lot of people end up with like downspouts or something, but can't go wrong with epoxy. Lloyd,
I was going to ask him that earlier. Lloyd, what did you put your kit together with?
I put mine with, hold on, let me find it. It's a very strong, it's called E6000. It's a resin, no, it says poison. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Industrial strength adhesive.
Yeah, I wonder what that is. I mean, it's not a multi-part epoxy, so.
No, it's a clear. It's very clear, but it's very.
It's a building construction material, like in the real world.
Like a liquid nails.
Sort of. It's in a big caulking tube.
I can't take it apart. It's really stuck.
Well, yeah. Well, you hope so, of course.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
that's right.
So it's called E6000.
So, and I'm going to use this. I've got a few different sponges too to draw some attention to choices you've got. Makeup sponges are spectacular. Buy, I don't know, 50 or 100 of these things for $3 or $4 at CVS. They're incredible.
If you go to the dollar store, you can find them. I don't know whether you can see the difference here. The one with the red on it, you can see how rough it is.
Yeah, I like that.
What I've done is I took the sponge and I ripped it in half horizontally, and that's the inside of the sponge. This one here is also a makeup sponge, but it's very, very fine foam.
Right, that's what this.
And it doesn't matter if you rip it or not. You're not going to get the same texture as you get in this.
That's right. I just ripped this one, and it's not much difference from the flat, straight finishes of the exterior of it. It's relatively
right.
Now I do get some coarseness with this slick closed cell. Sorry, it's open cell, but it's a slick packing. It's styrofoam, packing styrofoam. I get a nice effect with this. Pretty decent. It's a coarser like what you've got.
I used the one that Ralph was showing, the white triangle.
The wedge? This one?
Yeah, that's what I used.
But I took tweezers and tore the end of it up. But this sponge has that structure like what you're talking about. These sponges, took tweezers to these and tore them up. Actually, here, let's do it. So just took tweezers to that and tore the end of it up. You know, one of them I've already used, which I actually like because the slight skin of paint on that makes it, I mean, it's still somewhat soft because I washed it out, but it causes it to have a slightly stiffer exterior, makes it, you know, easier to get less paint on, and then, but just tweezers and tore it up.
So there's how I buy my sponges, and it says made in the U.S. So there you go. It comes in wedges. It also comes in like a disc, and the disc is nice because you can put your finger in the middle, wrap it around, and create a dome so that there's no edges.
Oh yeah, I dig that.
So you paint the center part of it.
And is there still enough thickness there so you can rip it?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is just a little bit over a quarter of an inch thick. And you'll find when, especially this type of foam, when you wet it, it increases in size. And I can show you that. I'll get two of them, leave one dry.
Yeah.
I have my trusty window washer for my car and spray in a spray pump bottle.
Works like a champ.
It does. Okay, there's a dry sponge. There's the wet sponge.
Wow.
And they're both sitting on my fingers, so the bottoms are even.
And you're trying to convince us you're not cheating, I suppose. With the sponge.
No, I'm not fooling around. So when I take the moisture out of these things, I roll it in my hand and compress it as hard as I can and let the water just drip out. And then roll it on I have track pants on, or a piece of paper towel on your lap. And that's the moisture you want to work with, not soaking wet. If it's soaking wet, your paint's not going to look right.
But I know there's a bunch of different techniques for how to apply. What I've had such better luck with, especially I've done more on stone, because there's quite a bit of stone rock work on NW, Norfolk Western Railroad, like the Pennsylvania Railroad, use these fairly large stones like I use everywhere that are, in the real world, they're like 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet tall, 1.5 feet deep, 3 foot long, or maybe they're 2 foot by 4 foot. They're fairly long, a fairly long stone. They built bridge above bits and piers out of it. That's what I'm stacking stuff up with because they were everywhere around. When I do the stone work, I just keep applying paint pretty subtly for a while, you know, to begin with. And that's 4 different colors of red in the sponge. You know, just kind of tapping around and tamping it out on the plate as you can watch me work that. And then but it ends up kind of blending together in a bit of a color, and I'll just tap it around like that. Fill up very little of it, a whole lot of primer still coming through. Then come back and get a little heavier on in this case, we'll go back a little heavier with the brown and red. And just slowly add a look. In my case, what works best for me is just slowly adding color to it until, and a little bit of brown doesn't hurt too. But I haven't had good luck with darker browns, like nutmeg.
The interesting thing, Andy, is with the lighter colors like I've used here, the brick red, you can actually add aim powders to the mix and mix it into the paint when it's wet.
Yeah, I would
change the color.
And I think I would really like that for a concrete effect. Actually, I'll give that a shot before we reconvene again. Before I have I use 8 powders on all kinds of stuff. Do it in my track work and all kinds of stuff. But I have not, and I have mixed, straight pastel chalk. I have mixed with ballast and dirt and stuff like that because it's cheaper. 8 powders, I'm less likely to mix up in bulk, but I just keep adding the color to it. Also, it depends on what what effect you're going for. But if you're using like this pad sponge that I like so good, yeah, I do rip at it with tweezers as you seen a minute ago, but which makes it not a circle, especially tear off the outside edges to make sure it's not a circle. But if you're gentle as you press down, it'll leave the border lines in your primer color, so you don't have to come back and use a border wash of acrylic or I like gesso or a spackle. A lot of people use spackle. Spackle. I like the gesso quite thin as a border. Do you use just paint for border, Miles? I said you had a structure recently, something I was looking at that the border lines were just stellar for. And I'm not talking about the ones you cheat on with your photos. That's I get why they have good. I get why they have good border lines. Hey, listen, nothing against cheating. We're modelers here, And cheating's fair game, but
whatever works at the time.
No question about that. Well, see, you don't get condemned for cheating as a modeler. You get extra credit for cheating as a modeler. So, but you had something that had some border lines really spectacular on it that you showed us. I just don't remember what it was. What do you typically use?
I just use Liquitex white, titanium white, and then I mix it down until it's just really, really thin. I try to make sure that the brick wall lays absolutely flat so that it will, disperse. And then if I have to, I'll wipe it off the front of the bricks after it dries.
Yeah, I did some with I did some stonework casting. Actually, my stonework castings, because I've tried all kinds of crazy stuff. Many of them not working, but I used an oil-based whitewash to get it. That way, I could clear it off the top, and I clear coated I used acrylics to color the plaster, and then I primed it acrylics. Then I clear coated it, and then come back with the oil wash of white, so I could use some to clean the surface off. And that was a decent result, but I haven't tried it on brickwork precisely. Is that your go-to, Ralph? Do it with a diluted paint?
I usually do it. I try to do it anyway with gray automotive primer to start, and then I will add the brick lightly. And that works great for the plastic buildings that I've done. So this is the first plaster building that I'm working on, and the one thing you got to watch out for with plaster is that it's perfectly sealed, because if it's not, whatever you put on is going to soak into the plaster and it's going to disappear.
And sometimes that can be a desirable effect, like plaster rock molds, using a wicking action in the plaster to attempt to stain the plaster as opposed to paint it is generally what I see people recommend on YouTube videos and other scenery manufacturers and stuff talk about using that. I have also had the best luck after I had not had luck with my plaster rock castings. Me and Ralph were on here talking one time, and he's like, just paint the thing. So I had stained it initially. I come back and painted it after the fact, and I did something like what Ralph's doing on one of his walls. I did a dark to light, which seems to be the counter to what everybody says to do, and I had much better results. So with my stonework here, I also do the same thing. I start with a primer that is, it's not black, but it's reasonably dark, darker than any other primer I'm using. So what do you think about the difference? Do you think the difference in primer color makes any difference in the end result, or is that just something that I'm subconsciously?
No, it's definitely going to make a difference, because if you go to any automotive shop and talk to them about primers, they'll tell you which primers they use for what colors, and it definitely makes a difference. Even though they have the oxide red, which seems to be the standard. They have gray, they have white, they have black.
Yeah, see, we've got a body shop that rents from us next door, and I talked to him some time ago. At the time, we were talking about printing or painting PC cases or something, and talking about, he said the primer's going to matter if you're trying to get an automotive finish on it. And so after we had that conversation, I've talked to him briefly about this stuff. But I'm mostly going off what my personal experience has been doing it and doing brickwork. I like gray as a primer for brickwork really well, but it's a crisp color. And in my case, it's nicer because should be a slightly newer structure. I mean, this is a perspective thing because slightly newer. These structures should be quite a bit older in my case. So I wanted to warm them, and the brown seems to, and I probably should do a little research on the correct terminology for this, but it warms the colors up and the brown primer seems to just warms the colors up a lot better.
That's what I'm doing. It's priming in brown.
And it looks aged a lot more.
Right. And then you can just build up different colors from the brown, because brown gives you that base. The gray makes the brick look already old.
But like everything else, I think diversity matters a whole lot. I mean, I'm not happy with the tree construction method that I worked out, but the key is diversity. You know, if you're building a whole layout, you need a bunch of different tree techniques to build a whole layout. I think right now I've just been priming with. I'm a big fan of that camo spray bomb camo paint that I think all of us modelers are a fan of, track colors or whatever. I'm a big fan of that, and I use the khaki for warming up brick colors when I want that. Otherwise, I use a gray, but it's not camo. The camo colors does not have a gray color like that. I wish they did, but so I just use whatever gray primer, light gray primer. But I have seen a difference. I just couldn't tell exactly how impactful I should expect, or whether the effect just felt exaggerated in my own mind.
Now, you bought this building like this, or did you have to make it out of a mold? Hale?
Yeah, no. It's a downtown deco kit. In my case, these couple structures here came as part of.
I've never really seen Hale. I'm really new to this, so this is really fascinating to me.
And see, everybody has this. Everybody, styrene that's the name of the game of the hobby. I mean, everything's styrene.
Right.
Nothing against styrene, but styrene's perfect for replicating certain materials and mediums like steel. It's not awful for simulating flat concrete. Actually, this is the kit. This was a special.
Oh wow!
But it comes with a few of these structures.
Okay.
And I like the kit. And part of the reason was this kit was almost dead ringer for a photo of the Western Front section of St. Paul that I'm modeling there.
Okay.
The rest were just fair enough stand in, and you can't see the front of them too well from where it is anyway. That was he has various sub-limited run kits that are one-offs, but the vast majority, he's got a really big selection of different kits. But there's a lot of this stuff on eBay as well.
He names a lot of his stuff after different streets, like Adams Avenue, and I forget what. There's 3 of them all together, and there's a series of buildings for each avenue.
Wow. See, with my new land, I'm not sure if I'm going to have full-blown buildings just yet, because a lot of it's going to be flats.
Oh yeah.
For the time being, but I'm planning on having something in the foreground.
Well, that's where the full buildings fit.
Right. And it would be nice to have a variety of different kind of structures from different kind of material on the layout.
Mixed medium. That's become the name of the game in the hobby for a number of years. The right material for the right job. I mean, brass is a spectacular medium for certain things. And next month, when we start detailing the exteriors, and we start working with some etched metal parts, they're stellar. I mean, just absolutely stellar. And for a sneak preview of the results of that, Miles has a video on his channel where he did a fire escape with brass.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to do a similar thing here, which won't be a fire escape in my case, but I'm still in parts from a fire escape kit. And we'll start on that next month. Edge metal's great, or wood, of course. I'm a massive fan of wood. That was the origins of starting this show, was to try to assuage some of the fear that modelers have of some of these other mediums other than just styrene. I mean, nothing but nothing, styrene's fine, but these other things are not that hard to work with, and the fear of them is just unwarranted.
Sometimes you can find balsam wood more often than you can styrene.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
especially like Hobby Lobby and all that.
Right.
Yeah, Michael's.
You're better off buying the basswood to work with.
Yeah, I don't have much luck with balsa myself. Lloyd likes working with balsa pretty good, and I've known plenty of other people like working with balsa. It always has a bit of a fuzziness to it. To me, it looks like it. And I've even took steel wool to it. I've tried. I think I even tried a sanding sealer or something once on it, and I just don't get a good result with it. I mean, it's painted; it probably won't matter so much. But if you're looking to keep a natural wood effect, which I'm often either wanting a natural effect or I'm doing peeling paint and I want some of the natural to come through, I like bass.
So there's the wall. This side here was done with the black base. That side, the other side was done with the red base, the red oxide. And the red oxide one, after I put the red brick on, I went over it with a dark brown and back over it with the red brick. I didn't have to do the third step on this one. It just was the dark to the red, and the dark is showing through.
Yeah, I like the dark to light technique pretty good. That's a hard call, but you can see, even though our cameras don't do this stuff justice, you can see the variety that you want in color. I mean, if you look at a brick structure, and part of the reason that like photos work so good, like Miles has used for his backdrop flats, part of the reason that works so good is there's so much variety of color across a single brick facade.
And see that brown color? I added some black wash to the top of the other wall.
Oh yeah. That pops like a champ. That other one too. As soon as you put a wash over it, you use just a wash, Vallejo wash, or something.
It is a Vallejo wash, I believe, but you can do it with any acrylic.
Yeah. Or
and
water.
It basically is a black.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to recreate border lines on mine. I may do the same thing on my. Well, no, I should have border lines probably. So I'll probably still do a white wash over all of it to get border lines. And I think in this case, part of the reason that I'm not a fan of styrene for brick, for many other things, no problem, but for brick specifically, is the bricks are misshapen. Now, if it's a backdrop building, or if you adhere to the 3-foot rule because you happen to be 3 foot from whatever you're looking at, in my case, my layout's very, very front and center. Joey will test, it's eye level.
Definitely eye level, absolutely.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'11".
Okay, I mean, because everybody's taller than I am. I mean, there are people not even made it to the teenage years yet that have outgrown me. So eye level for me is not always eye level,
But being eye level for your layout, you can see the details in the buildings.
Yeah, I can't cheat at all.
You really can't.
Not all the stuff is in the foreground. I mean, and especially with the 2 foot wide aisles, these people who talk about the 3 foot rule, there's very few places on my layout where I could get 3 foot back for most things.
Right. The only thing you do is print out something and have it against the window, but maybe an inch off away from the window and the inside.
Oh, yeah. Boy, that's a great technique.
Yes, and that's actually a time saver. But if you like putting details in buildings, then by all means do it. Especially that one. You guys show that one building with the lights and everything inside. I love that.
Oh, yeah, BTS kit. Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure people have seen it, but too, but I can pull it down with the lights. Speaking of that, did you guys catch up on, did you see the latest Trapmaster video where they were showing off what Barry Silverthorne's starting on?
Isn't that the one Miles and Mr. Green did together? Rick Green.
Yeah, the roomettes.
The roomettes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. He's making interiors for buildings, and they're fold up, pre-cut, lasered, printed with. Where he makes the masters with Photoshop, and then they're printed. They're laser cut, so you just fold them and stick them in.
I really liked what he was showing, and not to condemn anything else that's out there. It depends on your use case. What's the right fit for something? Jim Sacco. What's the name of his company?
City Classics.
City Classics.
City Classics. Yeah, he has these building interiors that are meant to be, at least the way he displays them, backlit. And I like the pictures he has, but in my case, I think I would stick them on a piece of white cardstock or something in front like them. But the way these ones that they were showing off that Mary Silverthorne's doing is it's a proper picture. It's front loaded light like it should be. I mean, that's just you don't see things that are backloaded lighting unless you're looking at a backloaded projector screen or something like that. In the real world, that's just the wrong effect, I think. But
and he's got a firehouse. He's got the fire jackets, their protective clothing hanging on the walls. He's got their fire hats in there. I mean, it's just amazing some of the interiors he has. And what he's done is taken the Woodland Phoenix buildings and made them something else. If they were labeled by Woodland Phoenix for one thing, Barry's made interiors so that you could label them as a totally different building.
Okay, yeah, and he's playing with that. Yeah, well, that's something actually worth mentioning about those two that was pretty interesting. They are pre-scored to cut out. Yeah, like right, yeah, right, or perforated or whatever to be able to fold and to make the correct angles, specifically for the old DPM line of structures. So, and I mean, whose layout doesn't have DPM structures on it? So,
well, nothing working on right now. It's DPM.
Yeah, good stuff. Been a staple of the hobby as long as they've been around.
Right.
The guy who come up with those that. But I like the stuff that started that was before them. I liked Magnuson, which was resin structures. Is that right? Is that right, Miles? They were resin, right?
Yeah.
I think resin holds the brick detail better personally. I again, that's subjective, but to me it seems to hold the styrene. To me, always looks like cobblestone. They're slightly rounded, and I'm sure that has something to do with the injection process. But
yeah, Bob Lundy started Magnuson Models. That was his wife's maiden name. He sold that to Walters. Then he started DPM and he sold that to Woodland Phoenix. And now he's Lundy Studios down in Eureka Springs. He's making big city buildings. I believe they're already put together.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know they were already put together. I love everything Bob Lundy's done. I love Magnuson back in the day. I mean, he is that is an innovator in the hobby, that gentleman right there.
Well, he put himself through college as a bricklayer because his dad had a bricklaying company. And so the reason his buildings look so good is because they were actually designed by a bricklayer. And ironically, the degree he got was as an architect. So you got a bricklayer who became an architect. I mean, no wonder his buildings look absolutely spectacular.
As a model maker, no kidding. Yeah, and he did something that was sorely lacking in the hobby up until Magnuson and later DPM come on the scene. A lot of that's even before my time. But in the early days of my interest in the hobby, if you wanted a brick structure, it was likely to be a DPM kit. And I wouldn't say that that's untrue today. Probably it's still probably somewhat true.
He made a really innovative process for making those kits so we could actually produce them at a very low price, which was really great at the time.
Oh yeah, we got a good question too. That's right up Miles's alley actually. So we kept him on the hot seat for the last few minutes. But BNSF 1982 was talking about the Menard structures, and Miles has been fairly fond of those before, right? Did you like? They're What are they made of? And you like those, don't you?
Well, they're different. Some of them are resin and some of them are wood.
Oh, they do have actual wood kits.
I have several of them in the other room. We want you to go in there. I could take the iPad in there and show you some of them.
I don't, and they've got some. For a while there, everything they had was in O scale. Right now, I think they've got a little bit of HO scale stuff coming out that I'm kind of interested in. So
they have HO kits. One of the guys on the regular model YouTube model railroaders, we were looking at. You can go online to Menards, and they had Dairy Queen, Taco Bell. I forget what the other ones were, but they were lit. The only problem was, instead of having the jack on the back or on the bottom, they had it in a really obvious place that was going to stand out.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's one of the early ones, and yes, what I do is I just simply plug the hole where the plug-in is, and put it on the bottom, and run my wires up from the bottom.
Right.
So this is the latest one I just got for Christmas. It's going to be the concrete rock processing plant that's going to go in back here in the corner.
Cool.
Got a bunch of others over on the other side over here. Several together.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people who really do like those kits. The pricing is pretty good. They're complete. They got a lot of detail parts and stuff that come with them. And
yeah, that's their power plant there. I just added a Miller Engineering. Get my finger in here. Added a Miller Engineering ready kilowatt on top. Let's see. This is cast resin. I bet this thing weighs 20 pounds. I completely stripped all the detail off of it and put Walther's piping and other stuff on there to make it work. This one is a Menards building, and it has make everybody dizzy here. Has a working fan on the end there. I don't have the power on, so it's not running.
wow.
Turn. And I really wanted this one. Everybody's got pickle cars on their layout, so I wanted some. This is the Sauerkraut Pickle Factory, and that's also a Menards building. So yeah, depending on what you do with them and how you use them, they're really pretty modifiable to make them look good. The hobby shop on the end of the street there is Menards, and it has one of those fold-up interiors we were talking about, that just like what Barry's going to do, but this one was done by Menards. But they really look pretty good. And your fire escape that you were talking about, I'll give you the teaser for the next show.
Awesome. I'm really excited to work with this etch stuff.
That's the 3D etched one, brass.
Yeah, man.
And that's on a photographic building. No, excuse me, I take that back. This is on a Chooch O-scale cast building.
Yeah, still just a flat though. I mean, it's half the etch off the wall or something, if that. So.
Oh yeah, it's still a flat, but it does have raised pilasters here. It's not totally flat. The windows are indented. As opposed to this one next to it, which is this thing is just totally flat. There's no.
And honestly, the flat buildings, the flat structures with.
And the one on the left of it in the corner, this furniture company down over there, that's all flat. But you can't tell it. Abernathy Furniture. And down at the bottoms. Yeah. All pretty cool stuff. I think you have to be careful what you get from Menards, but some of it really looks good. Yes, sir. Did you say something, Ralph?
Yeah, I said thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to getting started on the etch stuff. And I absolutely, that's one thing. I mean, I want to learn 1,000 things, probably more than I have a lifetime to learn as techniques. One of the things I'm absolutely fascinated with is learning to etch, because I've etched circuit boards, not that dissimilar. So. So I just covered that one section. Still ain't going for some reason. Oh.
I know we do a hydrocal, but this DPM kit is pretty awesome. The C. Smith packing house, and the way one of the kit has all the windows built inside it. And okay, we have the headphones. All right. There we go, and I can hear everybody.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Excellent. So you were saying?
I was saying this DPM kit. The other one has all the windows built in. This has all of the windows and doors separate. Paint them separate. And what a pain in the neck it is to try to paint inside the mold itself. Here,
yeah.
all separate. Even here, even with this one, it's separate. So I can put tweezers right in the middle here and just paint without getting my fingers all over paint like this.
Oh, hey, you're not painting unless you get some on yourself. Come on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to put on my nose next.
Where's the fun?
Right.
What did you call it? Touch of the brush? Yeah, well, touch of the brush all over the place.
But the touch with the nose.
Brush all over you. That's a good thing. You're not bathing in the plaster. You're not really getting into the medium.
Absolutely. I never use gloves when I do model railroading.
That's what I keep trying to tell Andy when he's doing his ground goop. Get your hands in there. It's therapeutic. He's got to. Puts on latex gloves, and then he applies it with a spatula.
I don't.
You don't have green stuck all over your fingers. You're not doing it right.
I don't put latex gloves on. I use a spatula. I use one or the other.
When I worked at Woodland Cynics, we had one of the ladies that came to lunch. And she was eating her sandwich, and on the end of her fingers was all this green foam. You got to get into your work, you know?
That's right.
I tried.
Get into it, you're not doing it right.
I tried, and I don't disagree with some of the enjoyment value of getting your answer.
The biggest discussion at lunch was how do they get rid of the green bathtub ring on their bathtubs? Go for it.
All right, let's catch up with some of the questions that we've got. Dwight says he bought an American Bodybuilder's in-scale laser cut wood warehouse. I'm a spectacular fan of American bodybuilders, especially as beginner kids, because they're so doggone cheap that it doesn't matter if you mess up, really. He played the airbrush walls, airbrush the back or front first to prevent warping. They are relatively thin metal, wood. That is true. I tend to support them with square stock, and I'll find one in just a second to show you as a case. However, plating both the front and the back will reduce some of that warpage, but it still happens. So let me just show you one of the kits I've got and how I square stock it.
Well, this has been fun, but since I'm the only one that's probably retired military, well, I don't know if I'm the only one that's retired military or not, but I printed this last night on my 3D printer.
Oh, beautiful!
Really?
I always wanted an eagle on top of my flagpole, and they're so expensive; they're $100 or better. But this one I got off of Thing Universe and printed it. It took 11 hours to print, but man, it came out gorgeous. The guy that designed it was great. And
did you print it PLA?
What's that?
Did you print it PLA or ABS?
I printed this one in PLA. I probably should have done it in PEG. It might have lasted better outside, but I really coated this with a lot of, primer, and then with the gold, and then I've got 2 coats of polyurethane on top of that. So hopefully, maybe it'll last a while.
It'll last a lot of years.
If not, I'll print it again in PEG and we'll go there. But anyway, I'm going to head for bed.
Miles,
It's
before you go,
Yes, sir.
Miles, just a little hint. I've done some cottage signs for customers and polyurethane outside. When you get the polyurethane, make sure it has a UV rating.
Okay.
Because what it ends up doing is it goes frosty after a while
Okay. All right.
and starts to chip off.
Okay. I'll check the can. If it's not, I'll recoat it. Okay.
So I do. It's
guys
really
have a
nice
great
to have you, Miles. I'm glad to catch up with you, buddy. I know you've been real busy getting ready, so I'm sure everybody's looking forward to Amherst. So we're real happy to have you in January. I'm really excited about the show with you in February, talking about the etch stuff, the exterior details. So catch up with you soon. Have a good night, brother.
All right. Hope to see a lot of people in Amherst. Y'all take care.
Take care. See ya.
So I do. Actually, I'll grab a second one. For this kit is a Branchline Trades laser art kit, and one of the first wood kits I ever built in my life. When I started this layout, I knew I wanted to use a lot of wood kits, and on every previous layout I've ever had, everything I've had, this is my 13th layout, and the first one I'd built in over a decade. So I wanted to do something different. But I hadn't figured out a few things at this point, but I still did the, square wood across the structure at various places to keep it rigid. I've developed a better strategy of doing that by insetting the square by the size of the square stock. And the thing is, you buy this stuff so cheap. I mean, you buy 30-inch long sticks, I think 30 or 32-inch. Log sticks from Hobby Lobby for $1.99 or $2.99 for 6 or 8 pieces. It's a lot cheaper than buying, like if you're buying these little small packs, which you can't get the really small stuff. Like if you're buying this stuff from Northeastern or Mount Albert's, it's going to be quite a bit more expensive for much smaller amounts of lumber. Now, in this case, these are HL scale 2x4s, so that's the only source you're going to have for that particularly small material. But for structural material, the 1/8 by 1/8. Or 5/16 by 5/16, whatever's spectacular. What I do, though, and I'll take the camera and show you for those who haven't seen what I do for this, is I inset the square around the outside, and I set it up inside the width of another rung of this, which also, in a lot of structures, not always, but in a lot of structures, would mean that if and when I set a floor in there on top of that, it sets at the right elevation for the porch, exactly where the floor should set. But the advantage to insetting it up inside is this. Where the structure sets, I dig a basement. And all the guys on here who like to pick on me for how obsessive I am give me a hard time. Why do you dig a basement? What's the point of having a basement? Can you see it? No, can't see it. But the basement was there on the prototype. So shouldn't it be there on the model? That was me just kind of egging them on. The point of the basement in my case is for electronics. I feed the electronics through the basements, and it's a spot to hide an Arduino. So, and I chase the wire with a harness. So, like in the cases of these, there's a wiring harness that chases to my wiring trough under my track work. But all of my structures have basements under them and a square that is the size of the structure.
The interior.
That's right. Yep. As a registration, I think that I got that term from machinists that I've been watching.
Yep.
But registration to force it to stay right there. And if you buff the layout, that building doesn't go anywhere. And I can scenic right up to that edge, and it will always be a properly mating joint. But yes, you can paint both sides. To answer the question in earnest, you can definitively paint both sides. It will
absolutely. If you're gonna paint one side,
yep.
There's no question. Paint the inside as well.
Well, why would you paint the inside anyway? I mean, if you're gonna light it, if you're gonna put
not just for that. Not just for that. When you paint the outside, when the paint dries, if this was the wall you're talking about, and I painted the inside, the white part, if I painted this, that wall's going to want to cup to the paint.
Absolutely. It shrinks. Right? It shrinks.
So if you paint both sides at the same time, they'll dry evenly and keep it straight. And then your reinforcing is on top of that, because after that you'll be doing more coats of paint on the outside and different things.
Absolutely. And like, you need to paint the interior regardless anyway, so you might as well paint it at the time that you're finishing the structure. Now, I've had this debate numerous times, and I tend to fall somewhere outside of the standard on every debate. My typical... so I watch modelers do things through all the videos I've watched. I've seen two different choices on when to paint. I've seen a lot of the fine detail, fine scale modelers build walls in their entirety. Windows, detail, curtains, wallpaper on the interior. I mean, you name it, completed wall sections. And then just assemble them. And then the building's done. But they're building, a lot of times, they're building the walls entirely, completely. I can't seem to hide the joints perfectly or get perfectly mating sections. So, but the other alternative is to assemble everything and paint after. I paint sub-assemblies. So, just like I've done in these cases, I've rough built the structure and then painted it. I get the benefit of the sealing capabilities of paint to hide the small seams. So as long as you get a relatively adequate seam. Now, this structure we were talking about, this was the first one I built, and I built it per kit instructions. In this case, it has lap. So this is a tab construction. That's one thing I'd recommend for sure, Dwight, is the biggest improvement you can make on these cheap kits is these structures were built with tab construction. I don't use that. So this kit is also an American Model Builders kit. That one was tab construction with the trim strip over top. This kit, on the other hand, was originally tab construction, but what I've done is laid the panels out flat, cut the tabs off. Then I use a piece of square stock, fairly small square stock, 16th by 16th square, whatever thickness of your material is, and glue a piece onto the outside of this wall of either side and of this wall of either side, and then put them together with a square. That quarter makes the trim correct. So in these cases where they're tab constructed and they lay the trim over top, you get those little black triangles where the trim is setting on top of the siding detail. I despise that effect. Whereas if you do this, it looks like the siding is cut into the trim strip just like it should be. And that is $1.99 worth of wood and 20 or 30 minutes worth of your time. And you turn a $30 kit into at least the assembly construction quality of a $100+ kit for $1.99. So I'm a big fan of that.
Right, but there's nothing wrong with the tab construction. It is a strong construction method.
Probably
the problem is the filler strips you put on the outside.
That's right. And there are possibly ways to solve that. My easiest way to solve that was to square stock the quarters. But to solve the stiffness problem, I'm also putting square stock. In this case, they're harder to see because they're painted, because this building will have an interior. I often square stock the quarters. So it has a piece of 1/16 square stock making, say that exterior quarter has a piece of 1/16, and then on the inside it has a piece of the 1/8 by 1/8 square stock there, and then here upset a little bit. Now, I've learned, and now my newer structures don't have that little bit hanging down there. You live and learn. As my buildings, as you progress around the layout, you can see the order in which I built them as I've learned.
Who made those kits?
Let's see. This one is Branchline Trades, Laser Art. Branchline Trades, Laser Art.
Okay.
This one, I made the curtains with these curtains with tissue paper, but those are you can see the detail of those. Those are laser cut curtains from Builders and Scale.
Oh wow!
And yes. They look like I don't know they look like a doily.
I'm going to take pictures of this stuff, and post them for this.
Sure.
So people can have more detailed shots of the buildings. For
well,
sure.
This kit is like that that kit that Lloyd was talking about, the American Bodybuilders kit, and that is like that's like a $40, $35-$40 kit, whereas the Braceside Trades is an $80 or $90 kit. The difference in those kits, you can't tell the difference in them once you make a few modifications. Actually, this kit looks better, and it's half the price now, but all because of that detail. So, seems like we had a couple more questions before we end up for tonight. I wanted to cover one brief thing, too, if we get a chance before.
Eddie?
Sir?
I don't know if you remember my St. Eugene town. All my houses there are all from laser art. You remember?
Yeah.
I think I have about 6 or 7 of them. Yeah, they were all laser art.
Yeah, from Imagine That Laser Art?
All I remember is laser art.
Yeah, Imagine That Laser Art. Nick Basney. We had him on and talked to him about a year ago, give or take, in the show. He's now his kits are a little different than these basswood kits. These kits we were talking about are basswood kits. They're fairly thin material. You have to concern yourself with warping, and you have to put square stock material to support them, which is fine. Actually, may be preferable for residential structures and the like. However, for industrial structures and for brick structures, the Imagine That Laser Art stuff that Nick's doing is made on 1/8 inch MDF composite board. So one, it doesn't have a grain structure like basswood has, which makes it more conducive to laser cutting in general and to brick detail more specifically. It also requires absolutely no backing, no structural components, because it's an 1/8 inch thick MDF. It's stout. But the only thing I could say that's comparatively stout like that would be a hydrocal structure. Speaking of that, Sparky brings up a point that maybe we'll go back a little bit. He was talking about when he hadn't done a wood kit. Partly, he said, because most of the kits are over $80, a little harder to get started if you're worried about messing it up and warpage and etc. And then he was talking about Dwight, said that yes, that most of the kits had been more expensive and hard to do trial and error on. I don't disagree with you at all. Very, very, I don't disagree with you to begin with. Let's start with that part. Let's say that. Very, very, very many wood kits can be upwards of $500. Some of these. Yeah. I absolutely want to build a South River Bottle Works kit. That's a $400 to $500 to $600 Craftsman kit. What you're paying for with those kind of kits, however, largely is the detail parts and the book. It's a modeler's instruction manual in these kits with these. It's not so much about the walls. However, a kit like that is $40, number one. However, also a benefit to working with wood, in my experience, is you can pull it apart any time, whereas with styrene you can't necessarily. And if you screw up, get glue on the wrong side of styrene, you've damaged the detail. It's very easy to damage styrene with your glue because you don't use glue on styrene, you use solvent. You physically break it down, chemically break it down, you melt it to adhere it. Whereas with wood structures, hydrocal structures, or resin structures, my preference to work with, you use adhesives. So anytime you need to peel them and break them back apart, all you can do is scrape the adhesive off, and you're right back where you were with the original medium, never having lost anything. I also would not recommend anybody start with an expensive kit of any kind, regardless of of the medium that you're working with. That you could buy. You could spend a few $100 building out a Walther's turntable and roundhouse. That's not a good place to start. A good, $12, $15 DPM kit is where anybody would recommend that. Yeah, that's where you'd start if you were in styrene. Same thing with a wood kit. $20, $15. American Bottle Builders has a one-nighters, I think they call them series, maybe first timers, one-nighters, something like that. They're like $12, $15. They're wood. You can get your hands wet with it, work with it. You also have the key element, in my opinion, with working with wood specifically, and maybe even more, maybe as much so with hydrocal as well, as working time. Everything you're working with is a slower process. which is the reason most of us have many, many more projects than we probably should have going at one time, but because there's a working time. You know, when you're working with styrene, I stick the two walls together, I pull some MEK up, the thing's stuck together as soon as I pull my hands away from it. It's faster than super glue. Whereas with you're working with wood, I clamp it and put rubber bands on it and use wood glue on it. And if it doesn't look right, I've got a half hour to pull them apart before the glue's going to stick. So, right. Plus you can buy stock wood in bulk to, you know, to modify or make changes. I think a lot of the prejudice against alternative building mediums other than styrene is familiarity. The comfort level is not there because people haven't done it. That's why I've wanted to encourage people to buy a $15 wood kit and, you know, like Ralph would say, you know, get some wood glue on your hands or something, but and no latex gloves doing this.
I got these, it was $3, no $3, I'm sorry, 3 for $30 on eBay. So I look for deals all the time, especially bundles for these kind of kits, DPM kits. You know, very simple. Okay, obviously these are the ones with the windows already molded inside, but the other one,
that's what I don't like about
separate.
DPM.
No,
I don't like. Which the hydrocal structures, you know, have some of the window detail molded in as well. I mean, they have the.
No, this one molded. The other one is separated.
Some of them are, but
right.
Don't get me wrong here. I'm not knocking this. There are people who do plastic models. There are people that do the real fine scale laser kits and so on. When you walk into somebody's layout, you can tell the kits that are Cornerstone or Walters or whatever, you know them because everybody's got them.
The problem is, just a brief thing, interlude before you carry. The problem is they are so good that they've become so popular that everybody has them. It's not a knock on them. It's a praise. The problem is they've become ubiquitous.
Right. It's like a cold tipple. Everybody has the same kind of cold tipple unless you try to kit bash it with something else.
And it's not even a good model for Apple. You see it on these
like
Appalachian layouts. Yeah, you see it. It's a Western prototype. It would never be on Apple.
That's why, Andy, that all of my buildings are, you'll never see one like that.
Right.
No, because you're like doing a lot of scratch building.
Even though it's the old Anderson place, but it's been converted into a feed mill. So it's like this one has wood, styrene, and hydrocal.
Right. I think if you treat, I heard somebody say this one time that a kit was just a box of parts. If you treat Cornerstone kits, they're great parts. If you treat those really popular kits as just a box of parts and don't assemble them in the stock way, I think you're off to
kit bashing.
Yeah, that's it. But
which is what I do.
Just don't be afraid of wood. Sparky was saying in the corners, I do. It was a little harder to see in this one because I painted them because it's got a floor that goes in this that's not in it, but they're painted to kind of blend them in. But the inside corner is braced in this kit. Like I was showing a minute ago, I've used a 16th inch square stock on the outside to make the mating point between the exterior walls to make that corner trim look correct and inset with the siding cut into it the way it would be on the prototype. And then I've used a piece of square stock material to run the vertical leg to hold it true. And then also around the exterior, I also make all my roofs, well, about all of my roofs removable, and I cut these little wedges to make those. I mean, they mean for you to put it on as a tab construction, and I make a little, make those little triangles to make my roofs removable. And on structures that are very far forward in the scenery, I build a roof system that has.
Oh yeah, this is cool. I like this.
That has.
Check this out.
So, and this one was the same way. It's a tab and slot construction building that I cut cut up, and but this one also I made the wedge system and stuff for that. And there's a couple of raceways you can see because there's my electrical feeds, and it's got 8 or 9 rooms in it, a staircase and all that stuff. And there's 9 separate lights, one for each room, separately fed, so an Arduino can turn lights on and off in different rooms. I could do a lot better on this kit if I did it again, because I used a commercial raised seam roof, and the raised seams are just too large. They're exaggerated. Now I'm using this is styrene. Now I'm using the Builder and Scale raised seam, which is just a massive improvement over this. But I still make the roofs removable, even with the wires. And anyway, keep them as ring taken apart as much as possible. But so yeah, I mean, Sparky, if you're using the thin material, Dwight as well, any of you guys that are working with wood, just buy a cheap pack of 1/8 inch square stock at for $1.99 or $2.99 at Hobby Lobby or something, and go to town.
Even 1/4 inch.
Yeah, sure. Especially if it's a much larger structure.
Yeah, basswood. Basswood.
Yeah, basswood for sure. I just don't like balsa. Now, I mean, if you're flying model aircraft, RC aircraft, balsa's great. Yeah, balsa's great. If you're flying RC aircraft, if weight matters, for anything else, I like basswood. I just really like basswood. But
when I was modeling O-scale, I always had those MTH Rail King buildings, and they're already made. They're pre-made. And of course, they look shiny and everything from the factory paint. So I repainted half of them, except for one, and I weathered it. And it turned a Cornerstone building was supposed to be a dating service, and it turned it into a bar.
They had a building come out as a dating service originally. That's funny.
Yeah, it was a dating service originally, and it had a blinking sign. And I just put the bar name. I printed a bunch of signs off of the computer over Google and printed them out, cut them, and just glue them right to the brick itself and paint glue over it, and then spray with dull. And that's
a bar with an escort service. Nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm laughing. Just thinking about. I went from dating service to a bar. Sometimes the opposite way.
Well, one of the best things you could do is just with these Cornerstone kits is paint them different than the way than what the package will show. They're somewhat different, and make it a different industry or something. So
right.
Just sure.
Andy, I think I posted it. Did you see the insides of buildings, of all the DPM buildings that are going to come out?
Are you talking about the ones from that Barry Silverthorne was showing? That is basically for Master. Yeah, we were talking about that a few minutes ago with Miles. So Miles had talked about those too. So yeah, they're spectacular. Couple last things I built. I even do this for Hydrocal. I built the frame inside of this roof, which there's a piece of wall to be built here, and built the roof assembly so that it's removable, but it has a channel on the end. Of course, all this is not completed yet or any of that, but because it has to have an interior, but it's built as a removable section, but it has that same little registration lip that locks in, and it's quite tight. Not tight. You don't want it tight. You just don't want any room. You don't want a snug fit. That's going to break joints over time, especially as things expand and contract. But you just don't want any extra movement in it. And then that's it. We'll talk more about this when we start talking about exterior detailing and stuff. Start on that next month, which in my case I'm gonna roll roof it because it's 1950. But I built them all up as separate sections, and I like the thickness because on a real roof it should have thickness. In this case, because it's offset, or cut through, you can see the rafters there. So.
I don't want to see it from here, right? Nah, can't bring it on.
It's pretty hard to share.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's an hour and a half of a show anyway. Glad to have you up, Joey. Participate in the show and pull some Vanna White for us and show us models and carry the cards across. That was just fine. But sure glad to have you up this time for the show. Glad he
Vanna White's much better looking though.
Oh yeah, got to be. That's
sorry, Joey. Blonde wig, maybe.
I don't have any trees. I don't even have bench work up yet. So
trees too, but none of us are going to compete with Vanna White. So But all right, thanks everybody for joining us. Look forward to catching you guys. We'll be back next month. We'll post that date and time ahead of that show. We're going to do exterior finishing, porches, and or I guess you'd call it a balcony in my case, exterior with wrought iron railings, and talk about some etched material and some plastic railings and such that we've got that both Ralph and Lloyd done some really interesting stuff lately that I look forward to getting to show off as well that we can talk about next month. And if we have time, we'll get to covering roofs. And then in the following month, we're going to jump to doing some fairly serious interiors. And we won't spend the entire show just showing off a picture as well. So as we're going to model 3D interior components, scratch build a few things, maybe some shapeways components. Me and Lloyd both have a few shapeways components for a particular thing that'll be interesting. So any other last comments, and then we'll call it a night, guys.
I'm good.
Good for what? All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. That's the January show. Welcome to 2019. You guys have a wonderful evening. Everybody go straight home.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy, for having me.
Don't get hung up in the roundabout.
Yeah, not again. Gosh.
This nutmeg color is awesome.
That is a good color.
This one and coconut coffee being my two favorites now.
Night, guys.
Good night.